From the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., this is the Tyler's Place podcast, a podcast by Freemasons, for Freemasons, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the world. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree. Thank you for joining us. In the past, we have not been shy about talking about the fact that there are some strange goings-on at the House of the Temple. In 2022, we did our first ever live ghost watch. All night long, we shared cameras in a live stream from inside the House of the Temple, and the building did not disappoint. There are strange things that occur. The video is on YouTube. You can go check that out. There were EVPs. We heard doors slamming. It was truly a remarkable thing to be able to bring to our audience, and we are repeating that for 2023. So if you're listening to this prior to Halloween 2023, make sure you join us beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern Halloween night. And if you're listening to this after Halloween, well, then make sure you go and catch the recap, because there are always some strange goings-on at the House of the Temple. I, for one, am not willing to say that the place is haunted, but there are many people who would say that the building is haunted, and one of them is joining me now, and she worked in the building for a number of years. Dr. Heather Calloway is currently serving as the Executive Director of the University Collections at Indiana University in Bloomington. She specializes in preserving fraternal and religious memorabilia and collections, and we consider her still to be a part of the House of the Temple family. She doesn't work there any longer, and she and I kind of had a little bit of overlap, but right as I was coming on board, I think she had just moved on to her new position, but she still works with us all the time. Wonderful to bring her on the Tyler's Place. Heather, first let's explain, what did you do at the House of the Temple prior to the job you have currently?
I was the museum curator, figuring out what we had stored in all the closets, attics, basement bits of the temple, and then changing out exhibits, working with the intern program. I created the intern program and got it going and changed the way we did tours right before the Dan Brown book came out. So,
which law symbol?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but in your capacity as museum curator, I know that you spent quite a lot of time in the some of the darker areas of the building, the interstitial spaces and the spaces where, because there is stuff packed into every space in every corner of that building. There is stuff. No one throws anything away. I always tell people, if you ever brought anything to the House of the Temple, it's still here. Nothing has been thrown away in 100 and some years. So you in the search, and I understand you have a few ghost stories to share.
Sure, certainly. Well, we had lots of things happen over the years. I worked there for 14 years. So it's a big old building, and it's a lot of noises and strange things happen when there's only a few of us there. And we worked lots of odd hours because we were trying to get, manage events and meetings and things like that as well. So, yes.
And like any other office building, you can get more done if you get in early or you stay late, because when nobody's around to ask you questions or interrupt you, you can kind of get in the flow. And I get in there super early in the morning, and I know a lot of people stay real late in the evening because you can get stuff done.
Yes, for sure. Yep. So, and we used to have hours open on Fridays and weekends and things like that. And so those like off hours can be when you notice stuff around the building.
So what was, give me a couple of your experiences. Someone said you'd run into some orbs or things like that. So give me the Dr. Calloway's ghost stories.
Well, there's lots of ghost stories. So the best one, well, I don't know about the best. I could go on and on, but my interns were recording, unbeknownst to me at the time, but they put out some recorders, one in the library and one in one of the gallery rooms downstairs, and they just left them going. And so Joe would close up the building at 5:00. He'd go around and make sure everything's locked, and then he'd arm it and leave. And so you could kind of hear those, like, especially in the library, you can hear when you turn off the lights, they make this very distinct noise. So you could hear the lights be turned off, and you could hear people leave. And then probably maybe 45 minutes or an hour later, you started hearing noises. And the recorder that the students put there was motion activated. So it would record stuff as it picked up noises and things like that. So we heard voices, we heard shuffling around the library. We also had, when they put that thing there, one of the things in the pillars of charity fell.
One of the pillars or one of the stained glass pieces?
No, just like there were these plaques attached to the pillars, and they would say who had donated stuff.
Sure.
And one of those came off when the students had done that. And it made a large noise. And then when we looked later, it was just one of those plaques, and we had no explanation for that. It wasn't new. It wasn't super old. There was just absolutely no logic to why it happened when it happened, when no one was there.
And we should mention that little area of the building is bookended on each side by corpses. On one side is the corpse of Albert Pike, and on the other side is the final resting place of John Henry Coles, who was a Grand Commander who actually lived, worked, and died in the building.
Certainly. And on the other side, so the students had put the recorder in the library, but it's literally behind the stained glass pillars of charity. So that was kind of where they thought would be a good place to record. And we did. We heard lots of noises and things. One time when Art and I were working in what was the Burl Ives room at the time, we were shifting things on the shelves, and all at once the lights went off and all the shelves fell and nothing broke within one of the areas that we had artifacts. And it was quite scary because it just happened all at once. And I think I screamed, and Lois was one of our research society people that she was the administrator for that. She happened to be walking down the hall outside that gallery when this happened. And she came in and she was like, "Are you okay?" And those lights couldn't just go off. They weren't on a timer. There was nothing. You had to flip the switch for those lights to go off the way they went off. And for everything to have fallen, there was just no way for it. We tried to recreate it. And also all the things on the shelves were glass or ceramic or breakable, and they all fell and nothing broke. So it just kind of freaked us all out. Nothing specific, but there was that. We also had a carpenter, his name was Bill, and he would get there first. So maybe 4:00 in the morning, sometimes 4:30. He'd always get there really early because he liked to work early and get out early and miss traffic. And so he would go around and turn things on. And so he was using the men's bathroom on the top floor and washing his hands after he used the bathroom. And he looked in the mirror and something smoothed his hair as he looked up and looked in the mirror while he was washing his hands.
Moved his hair?
Like smoothed his hair, like ran its hand through his hair like you would do if you were, fixing your hair and looking in the mirror. He said he was the only one in the building. He said, "Heather, I have to tell you this." He was the kind of guy that would never believe that kind of thing. Like in a million years, I was always asking him, "Hey, do you ever notice anything? You're here by yourself. Do you ever hear anything?" So finally something happened to him, and he told me right away. And I know that guy wouldn't have made that stuff up. He also said he noticed the book that was sitting in the corner. There was a book up on a platform thing in the men's restroom, and it was Valley of the Craftsman. And he said he noticed the pages changing.
Now, so the pages were physically turning in front of him.
Yes.
All right, that's a new one. I've not heard that one before. I've not heard that one. Now, yeah, I've heard Arturo has an EVP that we discussed last year on the podcast and on the YouTube channel that was recorded in the Burl Ives room. And he, it sounds an awful lot like Burl Ives. And someone says very clearly at 2:00 in the morning when there's no one in the building, old memories. And that clears a bell there. But what would you say is the most active part of the building? And I'll tell you what I think is today the most active part of the building in terms of odd happenings.
Well, you tell me yours first, because it could be different since it's been a while. Yeah.
So I call it sort of the Grand Commander's corridor that runs from the men's room to the Grand Commander's apartment, where the Grand Commander's office is. which is where John Henry Coles would have, that whole half of the building was where he lived. And so
Yeah.
there's, and it's believed that he passed away in the men's room there, which is basically where our accounting office is now. And, there's every once in a while, I have had very few, I would say, supernatural experiences in the building. But once in a while, when I pass through that hallway, I definitely smell cigar smoke. And there's no one smoking in the building for sure. And in that spot. But that's the area where, and even last year when we set up cameras overnight. We have 5 or 6 cameras set up in certain areas of the building, and we monitored them all night for sound and for motion. And in that particular area, the camera kept triggering, and we kept hearing, if you've ever been to the House of the Temple, and obviously Heather has, but for those of you who have not been, in various places in the building, and they're all over the place, especially on the main floor as you walk in, there are these heavy steel grates that are actually doors, and some of them hide electrical panels, and some of them hide like a fire hose, and it's sort of this fancy screen type of thing. Was that accurate, you'd say?
Yeah.
And most of them, the locks don't really work anymore. They're 100 years old. Everything's original, so they're closed, but they're real heavy. They don't move on their own. And
you really have to like jar them to mess with them.
And they don't move or make any noise during the day. But that night, Halloween night last year, when we were watching, we heard the door above that camera repeatedly slamming. And there are people online making comments to the effect of, well, somebody got past your camera and did X, Y, and Z. No, there's no way you could have gotten past that camera. There's only one way into that space. And the camera was aimed at it. The camera was pointed away from the men's room towards the Grand Commander's office. So anybody who came in, even if they crawled on their belly, we would have seen them. So something was slamming that utility panel door, I guess we could call it, above the camera repeatedly.
Sure.
It was 5 or 6 times in the course of the night, which was like really jarring to watch.
Yep. I know in that same area, as well as the atrium, you can hear someone walking with a cane. So Mr. Coles, definitely, we have hundreds of his canes. We ended up with all his personal effects since he lived in the building, and that was his home. And so you can hear somebody walking down the hall, that hall that you're talking about, but also in the atrium with a cane, and they're walking, how a person would, you'd hear footsteps, but then the little tap of the cane, you can hear that. So we've heard that multiple times at night. Yes, you can smell the cigar smoke. You can't see anything, but you can smell, and it smells like someone's like literally sitting there smoking next to you.
Yes.
George's whole suite it just gives you the creeps. You feel like someone's there with you in that area more than other parts of the building. I'm trying to think of some other, I think where we keep books and things in the basement, that whole area, I don't know what that was before it was part of the library collections and storage. But my office was near there for when I first worked at the temple. So the early 2000s, and you could hear people walking around in that room. And then you'd look and there's nobody in there. But it would definitely sound like people. You could hear whispers, you could hear shuffling, you could hear walking around, and you'd walk around and there was nobody in there.
I guess the ghosts don't like me, or I'm just too loud or something, because I do not, or either that or just at 20 years in front of a kick drum, I can't hear them. I don't really have any, I don't get it. People will say, well, I get a creepy feeling when I'm in this part of the building at night by myself, or even people who you wouldn't expect to be creeped out by certain things, they don't like being in the building by themselves. And I've never gotten any of that. It's never.
It's just certain. So sometimes it would be certain moments, and then you'd go there later and you wouldn't feel that at all in the same spot. And so it was almost like something was there or passing through, and then I think the most haunted room. So you think the Grand Commander's suite, his original apartment was, but I think the one in the basement that was the live-in facility manager. That was his apartment.
Mhm.
So I think you now have it as the facility office.
Well,
The
I
people
don't
that
know. I didn't know that. I didn't know there was someone else lived in the building besides Grand Commander Coles.
Yes, yes. So there was a guy that was a driver as well as the facility manager, and that was his apartment. So the one office was the bedroom, like the office if you're going in, and the bigger office, the living room. So then there's a bathroom there, like with shower
Right.
and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I
And
know what you're talking about.
and then the other office was the living room. And that whole little area where it says like building superintendent, that was an apartment where the person that take care of the building lived.
Oh,
And that
okay. So,
person would,
yeah, the building superintendent, Bridget, she works in one of those offices. The bathroom doesn't function any longer, and the other office is occupied by Matt Bowers, who hosts the Scottish Rite Journal podcast and does some of the Tyler's Place stuff as well. So now, did that guy live there for a long? Did he didn't die there? I'm guessing.
I don't know. We never looked into it, but that would be something cool to look into because that office, the bigger office, is probably the most haunted space of the entire building.
Get out of here.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. So, when Sean was the building superintendent,
33rd Grand Cross.
yes, he had cameras in there sometimes, and just the kind you buy like online. And he had a lot of really cool Masonic artifacts and things like that. And he's the one that caught orbs and other things on film in that room. The lights would flash. This was always at night. Stuff, nobody was there. It would trigger and things would change in that room, whether it was the lights or you'd see something kind of flying by and it just looked like a speck of dust or something, but you could tell it wasn't.
Wow. All right. Well, now we're gonna have to set up a camera on Halloween night. Because we're going to do this again.
That's cool.
So what we do is we set up several cameras, and then even I'm not in the building, so there's no way that
There's no one there. Yeah.
there's no one there. And we could use our security cameras, but we don't want to like give away the location where our security cameras all are.
Of course not.
So we set up separate cameras that are triggered with audio and everything. And we didn't really hear anything happening in the temple room. When we went to the temple room, the only thing we could hear was the camera would kick on now and again. And when you listen back, it was things happening out on the street because the
Sure.
room, it's up about, I guess, 30 feet maybe
Mhm.
but there are very large doors and very large windows in that room. And you can hear 16th Street pretty clearly and it's not a quiet street. So
the stained glass is thinner because it's old, it's original, and so it just doesn't have the insulation that we do nowadays. So it picks up that street sound.
now, in your capacity as the executive director of collections at Indiana University, there, you probably have come across many objects. Has there ever been one that creeps you out? I know at the House of the Temple, I think the creepiest thing we have is Pike's death mask, which has chunks of real Albert Pike in it. There's pieces of his hair and his beard,
Hair, yeah.
eyelashes. It's creepy. Is there another object that you've handled that hits that needle as well?
The creep factor?
Yeah, or any object you've ever really handled besides Pike's death mask, which is creepy to me. I don't like being around that just because, I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, death masks are creepy. I think collections that have people's hair, that used to be a thing in the Victorian age.
Mhm.
And so lots of collections end up with these donated, this was so-and-so's hair, and they've braided it or done some sort of decorative thing. I always think that's pretty gross myself. We don't have any of that here, but some of the collections that we have here at IU obviously do, just because that was a thing in the Victorian age.
Right.
Sometimes they put it in a locket. Sometimes it was, either a child or a loved one that had died. And so they would keep a little memento with hair. I think those are pretty morbid.
And people didn't have photographs at that point in time, though. So they wanted to keep some memento of their loved one. They didn't have photos very much, and they didn't have,
Right.
paintings were really expensive. So If you were just a
Yeah.
normal everyday person and not a king or a queen or something, or a robber baron, I guess, you didn't have access to cameras and things. So you snip somebody's hair.
Yeah, and that's those I always kind of find that strange. I love the George Washington funeral Bible that's at the House of the Temple because I really think that's something that was used. It doesn't spook me out by any means, but it was used at his funeral. So what a cool piece that we have that it belongs to Federal Lodge number one, and they come and borrow it for various occasions and installations and things. But just the fact that you could see that at the House of the Temple and think about that story of the fact that they needed a Bible and they found it and they had it and that we actually have it still.
Yeah, and we actually did a whole showcase of that Bible on our YouTube channel. So if you go to our YouTube channel and type in George Washington's Bible, that will come up. But so
Did you know I was the person that found it?
I did not know that. I knew that they had found it, but I didn't know that you found it.
It was me. Yep.
So how did you find? Was it one of those things in a corner under a stack of things?
Yeah, it was so the lodge had sold their building and they had packed all their stuff and they had put them in tubs in the back of the Scottish Rite DC in the wardrobe area.
Mm-hmm.
They had just tubs of stuff back there. And one day we decided to go through the things to help them figure out what they had and if there were things that they could, that if there was trash versus artifacts versus, what do they have back there? And there were so many different members of their lodge at this point, they didn't know what had been packed when they moved. So I helped my colleague, Kevin Freese, and I went to library school together at University of Maryland. And so we were both archivists and he was a member there. And so the two of us kind of spearheaded that effort and then found the Bible when we were opening all the cases.
Well, I didn't know that. That's very cool. What a find.
Yeah.
Something that could be easily overlooked.
Yes. And that it was in the closet of the wardrobe of the Scottish Rite. I mean, who knew?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I always encourage, and there's a YouTube channel by the guys at Huguenot Lodge number 46 in New York, and they are doing this sort of YouTube almost in real-time exploration of their lodge's history. And they start by opening their first books and searching out their records, and they're doing a nice job with it. But I encourage lodges to take the time to do that because there are real treasures in there and little bits of information that could, really change history. I mean, just 2-3 years ago, somebody found Harry Houdini's shrine petition and it completely rewrote his, sort of fraternal history because everybody said, oh, he joined the shrine just before he died. It was actually 2 years before he died. So it wasn't just before it. It changed things around and you found Washington's Bible. That's very cool.
It is. We also had in that same batch of stuff was a gavel from James Hoban, the architect of the Capitol.
Oh, wow.
And he was also a member of that lodge. And then J. Edgar Hoover's Scottish patent was in there. And, it was just folded up and kept in. So we found 3 famous people's stuff within just, a couple tubs of stuff that had belonged to the lodge.
Wow. Now, maybe you know the answer to this. The Burl Ives had a large collection of his things at the House of the Temple. There was a whole room dedicated to Burl Ives that is currently the Grand Archivist's collection, I believe. And there's, some of his rings, a guitar, a little statue of the snowman. There's a bunch of things, and those things have all since been donated to the American Folk Music Museum, which I don't know if that's open yet or not, but they have all of his things now, except for a couple of things. And a few months ago, I was in the temple room doing a video thing, and people have been fascinated by these Masonic Bibles. And in an effort to show that the Masonic Bible is just a regular Bible and it's not, doesn't have, Lucifer and Satan written all on the inside, like, a lot of dumb internet people believe. I opened it up and I was on camera and I opened it up and for all the world, it looked like there was a big blood stain in the middle of it. So I closed it immediately. I was like, so I shut off my cameras and I go and look and I opened it up and it was actually a large red flower pressed in there. And it was a flower from Burl Ives' funeral. And the Bible itself said it was a gift to Burl Ives upon receiving his 33rd degree. Do we know how that one ended up on the altar in the temple room?
Usually they would just the various Grand Commander or whoever was having an event, sometimes they would want a different Bible just because of how it looked. We had a really old one in there that didn't really have any historic significance, and we changed them out here and there for different occasions and events that they were having. So that one probably got moved there when they wanted a different one to use, and never left.
Just happened to be handy and somebody grabbed it and never didn't.
Yes,
didn't know
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was just the strangest thing to really to open that up and see that. And me, when I first saw it, it was when I first saw that thing, I swore I thought it was like a blood stain or something, and then it was. But then you open and it's Burl Ives' Bible. It was like, okay, and that's his funeral flower. Got it.
And we get donations of Masonic Bibles all the time from all different people, and widows and kids of people, and so there's a lot of those floating, and some are cool and have some sort of historic nature, and others are, they were just a cool Bible that a family owned.
Sure. Well, Heather, in your professional opinion, not as and stipulating that you're not in fact a parapsychologist or a paranormal investigator of any kind, would you say that you think the House of the Temple is a haunted area?
I would say 100%. I know it's a haunted area.
See, I'm not there.
Yeah, as a museum curator and archivist, I've spent countless hours in the closets, attics, basement of the House of the Temple, and had lots of things happen over the years that are kind of unexplainable.
I'm not quite. I saw all those things on the live stream last year. I've heard all the stories. I've smelled the cigar smoke, but I'm just not there. There are things that we can't explain, but I have to remain just a smidge more skeptical than that. But I certainly, you are not alone in your belief that poor Elizabeth Sizemore, she skitters across the atrium sometimes at top speed, like, Scooby-Doo and the gang, zoinks, and
yes.
on. So
yes. Well, and I think the library is also kind of spooky. I don't know is it a former librarian? Is it, you might ask, I don't know if Larissa would ever agree that it's spooky or haunted, but definitely, you would just have this strange feeling here and there when you're in there. And there's a lot of cool history in that room.
A lot of cool history indeed, and a lot of strange occurrences. Dr. Heather Calloway, thank you for sharing some of your Masonic ghost experiences from the House of the Temple. If you want to have your own Masonic ghost experience, make sure you check out our live Halloween Ghost Watch 2023. If you're listening to this before Halloween, make sure you join us live on YouTube, youtube.com/Scottish Rite Masons. Make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications. Halloween night, 2023, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we will begin the live Ghost Watch with cameras all throughout the House of the Temple. And if you're catching this episode a little later, make sure you go to YouTube and catch the replay. Definitely some strange things happening at the House of the Temple. That's going to wrap it up for this Halloween edition of the Tyler's Place podcast. We will catch you next time. I'm Maynard Edwards, 33rd Degree. We'll see you again at the Tyler's Place.